Let's talk about some specific industries. Dairy is one that gets a lot of attention lately because of the methane, the impact, and some people are out there saying that what we drive is more important, sorry, what we eat is more important than what we drive in terms of our personal carbon footprints. Cows, agricultural, sort of industrial agriculture is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. What is the dairy industry doing to try to get ahead of this and be cleaner? Glen?
The dairy industry for years has been trying to work on carbon, and about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Blu Skye worked with the dairy industry to, in essence, identify where are the hot spots. So very much like Michael is saying, figure out where in the supply chain are all the impacts, focus on the few things that matter. And there's a lot of conversation today about enteric methane and the contribution that has for global warming potential. And so really they're trying to figure out, okay, what are the practical solutions? Whether it's capturing that and turning it into energy on the farm, like what are the economics of actually implementing those solutions? And it has a lot to do with economics, has a lot to do with the supply chain, who they're selling it to the retailers. But I think that the most important point is it's about system change. You can't just change farmer practices and solve the issue. You have to have the whole supply chain together working to optimize and making sure that, in essence, the math works.
Does the math require, if the incentives are not aligned, as people often talk about, does that require policy intervention? Are they going to do this? Are they suddenly going to say, oh, we can make money out of this waste, this cow discharge or whatever is going to be as an energy source, rather than something we...
Can I tell a story about a dairy farm I actually bought some offsets from a few years ago in Wisconsin? The guy got a master's in veterinary medicine and moved back to the community he'd grown up in to build a farm, now two, that sourced all its grain from within a 10-mile radius, shipped all and shipped no waste, pumped water 3 miles, pumped what was left after they digested the manure and the waste out to fields within 3 miles. And the only thing that left that farm was milk. And the only thing that arrived was grain, pretty much, that had been grown within a 10-mile radius with a couple of a couple of nutritional additives here and there. And he'd managed to create, quite simply, a pretty closed-loop system. And his goal wasn't even, his goal was to reinvigorate the county he'd grown up in economically. And he successfully did that. So there are lots of different motivations you can do that. But the point is, by thinking whole system, he was able to create this amazing dairy farm. And I think there's a huge heroic narrative in the food industry in general. Hara has a number of food-based clients, whether it's grocers like Safeway or UNFI, one of the largest distributors of organic food in the country. There is a huge carbon impact to the food and to the food supply chain, but there's also huge leverage to change practices, agricultural practices, methane capture, where you can literally become a producer that differentiates with an 80% leap in benefit pretty quickly, because it's so obvious what's going on by intervening in agricultural systems in other places.
Michel Gelobter is Chief Green Officer at Hara Software. Eric Olson, there's another food example, McDonald's. People don't think necessarily green when they think of McDonald's or healthy, and yet you think that they've done a fair amount in this area.
They've done an enormous amount in this area, and I take it as one of the great examples. We were talking earlier about what are the motivations and to what degree are consumers demanding better products, safer, healthier, more environmentally preferable. And the way I like to think about companies like McDonald's, as put aside some of the companies, the specialty brands and retailers who are able to cater directly to people who are interested in eating very differently.
And charge more for it.
And generally we pay for it, and it's really quite easy to live that way, again, in the city that we're sitting in. And the way I think about what McDonald's is trying to do, and other companies like it, I call it sustainability for the rest of us. So in a sense, we need to find solutions that work for food at a scale that is actually capable of changing how a very large majority of us eat. What they have done is started, as many companies do, with some very, very simple measures and ideas. Their supply chain is absolutely enormous, as you can imagine, and started by asking suppliers some very simple questions. How much energy are you using? How much water are you using? In some cases, jumping over their first tier of suppliers and intervening, or at least trying to understand back at the farm level, which is kind of an interesting thing to do. In doing that and going through some of the kind of thinking that we've already talked about today, identifying hotspots, areas that really matter, they were able to laser in on issues like antibiotics in some of the livestock streams that they have, and actually find ways by working with these same suppliers, leveraging their scale and influence to get them out. But to get them out and to move in that direction in a way that can be scaled across a supply chain that is absolutely huge. It's not going to be good enough to run a pilot in one portion of the United States or in one commodity. They need to find ways that can then be adopted incredibly broadly. Now, the other big piece for them and for a company like that is obviously the food itself. And I think it has been interesting to see what they've been doing with the menu in terms of adding elements to it, some of them a lot healthier, a lot more messaging. And one of the things, and I saw a presentation by their CEO, Jim Skinner, was actually at our conference a few years ago, that was really quite interesting and I think highlights also the role for companies like that in popularizing the importance of these ideas in ways that people like myself can't do. You know, the same marketing genius that we see on our television sets, for better or worse, on Saturday mornings and at other times, speak to people more broadly. So their marketing of milk to kids was a great example that he told. And this, you know, this sort of, you know, exactly what you'd expect. You don't just sell a carton of milk at McDonald's. It's going to be in this container with all kinds of cartoon characters on it. And then stats behind it.
Lots of plastic.
And yet another issue to work on, absolutely. And then you look at then what it's driven in terms of consumption of milk, of vegetable sides with the Happy Meals and other things. And you can take a perspective that says they have done more to increase the consumption of raw vegetables and milk by kids than any one of the specialty brands that I might prefer.
And how
so
much
a
of
different,
this,
a different angle, very much a different angle on the problem.
Eric Olson is Senior Vice President with Business for Social Responsibility. I'm Greg Dalton. When I see those McDonald's ads and they show the burgers and the salads, I say, they really want to sell the burgers. The salads are there because they want the government not to regulate fast food, that they're partly playing defense. I mean, any truth to that? Is that too cynical?
So it's a great question. I think it is too cynical because what they want to do is serve more customers at absolute highest margin they can get.
But they make more money on a burger than a salad, probably. Maybe not?
That's not a safe assumption. So, so that's part of the, you know, again, when I talked about how do we assess the credibility and the staying power of these efforts, when they roll something out at that scale, they roll it out because it works. And that means it works at a couple different levels. The goodwill that they would be attempt to be buying in no way could compensate for rolling out across that massive chain something which doesn't actually sell or work. They couldn't do it. So in that sense, it's self-regulating. I think they would be absolutely delighted to be able to sell a whole bunch of new product at interesting margin through the system. And this is one of the classic cases where we get into this question of what's the role of company with its brand, with its reach, in terms of advertising, in terms of framing, positioning our purchasing choices, in educating people and contributing to shifts in behavior.